Imagine a day that doesn't just feel good, but feels like the end of a long, bruising journey and the beginning of something entirely new. The sun feels like healing on your skin, the air tastes like hope. For the first time in years, you can finally breathe. And then, just as peace begins to settle, a single cruel voice tries to tear everything down. This is the story of that day, the story of a girl named Eliza, who believed endurance was her only strength, and the 5 seconds that proved her wrong, the 5 seconds that changed everything she thought she knew about herself. It's about the legacies carried quietly in our blood, the unwritten contracts older than memory, and the loyal guardians waiting in the spaces between our world and another. If you've ever been told you're too quiet, too soft, too weak, too insignificant to stay here, because this is what happens when silence decides to speak. The real power of this story isn't just in the unforgettable moment of justice, but in the unshakable truth that follows it. To understand the depth of Eliza's silence, you have to go back, not to Northwood High, but to a small weathered cabin hidden deep within the ancient woods of the Sierra Nevada. Picture a little girl with storm-gray eyes sitting on a wooden porch, listening to the whisper of wind through towering pines, breathing in pine-resonant damp earth. Her mother brought her there after her father left, seeking comfort from the only family they had left to her grandfather. He was a quiet man, his hands worn like the roots of old trees, his eyes holding the same stormy gray as hers. He didn't read bedtime stories. He told stories whispered by the land itself as the old ones, stories of the first people who knew the language of rivers, of stones, of the wind, of great wolves, not as beasts, but as guardians. The wolf doesn't hunt for sport, he would say. It hunts for family. It protects its own. Its strength isn't in its snarl but in its loyalty. There is a kind of strength in this world that is quiet. It watches. It waits. It's deeper than all the rest. To little Eliza, these were just beautiful fairy tales. When her grandfather passed away, she and her mother moved to a flat suburb to start over. The pine-scented stillness was replaced by traffic, concrete, and the loud, unkind halls of high school. In the woods, her silence had meant listening. Here, it meant weakness. She became a ghost, a quiet, pale, existing without being seen. And Bryce Harrington made sure she stayed that way. Bryce was not just cruel, he was strategic. Raised on his father's mantra, "The world is a hierarchy, find your place at the top," he treated people like rungs on a ladder. His cruel jokes were performances, carefully staged for attention and applause. He spilled soda on her homework, mocked her voice, called her ghost like it was her legal name, a non-person, a blank space. She never fought back. She never cried in front of him. Her silence was her only rebellion. She crossed off each day on her calendar, counting down to graduation, of the day she could finally leave, rediscover the girl who once listened to the mountains. And then, it came. Graduation day was perfect. The sun was gold. The gowns flowed like ink. As she walked across the stage, she felt something shift inside her. When her name was called, she lifted her head. For the first time, she met the world's gaze. She saw her mother's tears, her teachers smiling, and Brycea smirking in the crowd. Their eyes met for a second, and she didn't look away. That tiny moment was a crack in the dam. After the ceremony, she slipped away to the old oak tree by the edge of campus, a quiet pocket of shade. She unzipped her gown and let it fall, feeling light, real, free. The sun warmed her face. She was back, just for a heartbeat, on her grandfather's porch in the mountains. Then the voice shattered it. "Well, look who's ditching the uniform." "Couldn't wait, could you?" Ghost, Bryce, with his two shadows, Carson and Mitch, their arms folded, already bored. Their last performance. He stepped closer, voice low, dangerous. "Rule 7, you keep the gown on until you're off school property. Respect, something you know nothing about." She felt the old familiar fear rising in her throat, icy and choking. But beneath it, something different this time, something warm, something alive. Anger. She looked up. "Just leave me alone, Bryce. It's over. We graduated. Your rules don't matter anymore." The change in his face was instant. The smugness dissolved. What was left was something raw, ugly, shaken. Her defiance wasn't just disobedience. It was a threat, a crack in his kingdom. "It's not over until I say it's over," he hissed. His eyes scanned the grass. They stopped on a baseball bat. His steps were slow, theatrical. He lifted the bat. It wasn't a sports tool anymore. It was a declaration. You need a final lesson, Ghost. He swung, not at her, at the oak tree. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Wood split. Splinters flew. The tree, the silent witness to all their lives, now bore an ugly wound. She cried out, stumbling back, falling to the grass. Completely exposed, he loomed over her, blocking out the sun, raising the bat again, this time for her. For every time you looked at me, for every breath you dared to take in my direction, for breaking my rules. Time fractured. The bat fell. She squeezed her eyes shut, not begging for rescue but calling to something deeper, to a memory, to a bloodline, to the stories that had waited, silent, in her bones. And the world answered. It wasn't just sound, it was vibration, a roar, ancient and wild, rising from the ground, from the air, from something deeper and older than anyone could explain. From the crowd, something burst forward, silver, gray, immense, alive, a wolf, too large to be real, too powerful to be imagined, too silent to be a hallucination. Its fur shimmered like storm clouds. Its eyes burned amber, ancient, intelligent, furious. It moved like a storm with a heartbeat. It hit Bryce with the force of a landslide. He dropped the bat, collapsed. The great wolf stood over him, snarling, a lips pulled back enough to show the possibility of violence, but not the intent. It did not bite, it judged. And it waited. Eliza stood. The fear was gone. She walked toward the wolf. The crowd watched, frozen. The wolf turned its ears toward her. Not violent now, reverent. She didn't touch it. She didn't need to. They were already connected. You spent 4 years trying to make me feel small, she said, calm, steady. You built your whole world on my silence. But you never understood. Some silences aren't empty. They're full, deep, waiting. She looked at the wolf. It growled once, then stepped back, and everything, every rule, every hierarchy, every Leah collapsed. Security and teachers rushed in. Bryce was taken away, shaking, babbling about wolves. No one believed him. They called it stress, a breakdown, hallucination. But the 60 people who stood there that day, they knew. They saw the splintered oak. They saw her eyes. They felt something change. Eliza didn't stay. She didn't explain. She left the town quietly for a small college near the deep forests of the Pacific Northwest. A place that felt, somehow, like home. She didn't need to call the wolf again, because the wolf was never separate. It was always in her. She was never weak, never alone, never just quiet. She was wolf-blooded, and the legend lived in not as a story of revenge, but as a story of awakening, a reminder. Sometimes, the quietest people carry the loudest truths. So tell me, Broken Bar, what kind of ancient strength walks with you, and where are you watching from? I read every word. The air in the Pacific Northwest felt different. It wasn't just colder or cleaner, it felt alive, like it was listening. The towering evergreens didn't just stand, they watched, silent guardians cloaked in moss and mist. And when Eliza walked between them on crisp mornings, she felt something she'd never felt before. She felt seen, not stared at, not judged. Seen. In this quiet corner of the world, tucked between pine trails and old wooden bridges, she began to exist differently. Not as the ghost who quietly endured, but as a girl slowly learning how to arrive. She rented a tiny studio, barely big enough for her books and her silence. But for the first time, silence didn't feel like armor. It felt like soil, something in which new things could grow. Healing did not arrive dramatically, as there were no thunderclaps, no mystical wolves watching from the trees. It arrived in small, human-sized moments, like the soft-spoken barista who remembered her order by the 3rd day, like the roommate next door, Maya, who knocked gently when she heard crying but never pushed the door open, like the professor who said, after reading one of her papers, "You don't speak much in class, but you're writing a broken bar, your writing has thunder in it." One evening, Maya appeared at Elisa's door with 2 mugs of peppermint tea and no explanations. She sat cross-legged on the floor and asked one single question: "When you're quiet, a broken bar, are you safe, or are you hiding?" Eliza didn't answer, not that day, but the question stayed. She carried it into her dreams, into the forest, Into every sunrise where the sky peeled apart in soft oranges and bruised purples. Was her silence strength or an echo of old wounds? Weeks turned into months, and slowly, she learned something no one had ever taught her. Healing is not loud. It doesn't always come with fierce courage or sudden transformation. Sometimes, healing simply means giving the broken parts of you permission to exist a broken bar without apologizing for them. One rain-soaked afternoon, she stood on an old mossy bridge overlooking a rushing stream. No one was there. A broken bar, and yet something felt near. Not the wolf itself, but the idea of it, watching, quiet, patient. She spoke out loud, not to the forest, not to herself, but to the part of her that had once thought endurance was the only kind of strength she would ever have. "I'm not hiding anymore," she whispered. "I'm becoming." There was no answer, but the wind moved, soft, approving. Weeks later, in a writing workshop, their instructor asked them to write a story not about characters, not about magic or myths, but about the moment they first realized they were more than what the world told them they were. Eliza wrote like someone remembering her own name. She did not mention wolves, or supernatural bond, or legendary guardians. She wrote about a girl sitting on a porch on the edge of deep woods, listening to stories that didn't feel like stories. About a graduation stage that felt like a battlefield she walked away from victorious. About a day when fear fell silent, but she did not. And about how sometimes, when strength finally arrives, it does not roar, it remembers. When she finished, her hands were trembling. She didn't cry, not from weakness, but from something softer, freedom. That night, she walked home through the forest path, leaves crunching softly beneath her shoes, and even though she was completely alone in a broken bar, she didn't feel lonely. She looked up at the sky, where clouds drifted across a pale moon. Deep in her bones, quiet as breath, something warm and ancient finally spoke, not as a voice, as a feeling. You were never the ghost. You were always the girl with the storm in her eyes. And somewhere, maybe in memory, maybe in truth, a wolf lifted its head, not to protect her, but to honor her. Because she no longer needed saving, she was becoming her own guardian.